And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and the Commander format is speeding up tremendously, as I'm sure a lot of you have noticed. Well, I mean, I guess if you've only been playing the Commander format for a couple of years, maybe you haven't noticed. But if you've been playing the Commander format for like 5 or more years, like I have, you've probably noticed it speed up quite a bit. I've been noticing it even on my own Discord. And again, a lot of people will say, oh, play more powerful commanders, more powerful decks, all of that. The reason I'm making this video is because even on my own Discord with my patrons, where we play, of course, all play very casual decks for the most part. And we all play, and I mean, very like-minded to me. So if you're familiar with my channel, you can probably imagine. And when I started playing with my patrons on my Discord probably 3 years ago now, the games typically lasted an hour and a half to 2 hours, which for me, that's a typical Commander game, right? That's sort of the whole idea. And now I have noticed a significant difference, and I could go through and actually do the math on all the gameplay videos I've done on my Patreon and actually crunch some numbers. Not going to do that. I know for myself, right? And in fact, back in September, October, I sort of made a point of keeping track because I noticed a lot of games were ending quickly. And in fact, I played, I believe, 6 games in a row that were under an hour. And for me, under an hour that's just not enough for a Commander game. Like, I'm setting time aside from my life to play a game with some of my patrons. I really don't want it to be over right away. And I know a lot of people think an hour is a lot, but guys, it's a 4-player game. That's 15 minutes per person. If you divided it up equally, that means you're only actually getting 15 minutes of gameplay time. For me, not enough. I mean, I'm not going to complain about it, but I really started to notice the difference in this last year of games speeding up incredibly. We all know some of the reasons, obviously more powerful commanders and more powerful cards, all of that. I'm going to go over some specific ones here. I've basically grouped them into 3 different categories, just for ease of discussion, but essentially there's probably more than 3 things that I'll be talking about here. The first one is probably the most obvious, which of course is power creep, and cards are just getting better. Cards are just getting more powerful. A lot of people have talked about Trouble in Pairs and how it's maybe even too good as far as white card draw goes. Yes, that's where we've gotten now, people. When Archivist of Ogma came out, I'm like, I think they're going a little too far with the white card draw here, and everyone just piled on me. How dare you say that? Now Trouble in Pairs, and people are like, I think it's too good. Well, whatever. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. This card, though, funny enough, it is doing a lot, and it is a great card draw option, but really it's just a slightly power crept version of Mangar the Diplomat, because of course, Mangar the Diplomat, which is also 4 mana, and is a lifelink creature, that's not nothing, came out a while ago, and draws you a card when you're attacked with 2 creatures, and draws you a card when your opponent casts their second spell each turn. And of course, that is 90% of what Trouble in Pairs is doing. This also draws you a card when your opponent draws their second card each turn, so that's tacked on as well. Also has the extra turn things, which I think most people don't really care about. It doesn't probably come into play much. Mostly, though, this is actually just a power crept version of Mangar the Diplomat. Probably the best example of a power crept card I think I've ever seen in my life is Gift of the Viper. This card is absolutely absurd for 1 mana. It came out in Modern Horizons 3, of course, which is like the embodiment of power creep. It's almost like they went out of their way to be like, how badly can we power creep with this set? Like, let's just take 1,000 different cards that are played in Magic or in the Commander format and just make slightly better versions. I don't know if this is a power creep version of a specific card, but this is an insane amount of stuff on 1 card for 1 mana at instant speed, and it's a common. So 1 green mana instant, if you haven't seen it before, put a +1/+1 counter and a reach counter and a death touch counter on target creature, and, because that's not enough, untap it as well. That is an insane amount of stuff to put on 1 card that only costs 1 green mana and is a common. Absolutely insane. I will just say this on the power creep situation, though, okay? I will say this. What if they made a 1 mana 3/3? Okay, let's think about this for a second. Let's think how crazy just this game in general has gotten, okay? They come out in the next set with a 1 mana, it's a green creature. It's a 1 green mana 3/3. 1 green mana 3/3. That's insane by all the standards in the history of Magic, okay? Now that card it's a vanilla creature, right? It's laughably bad in Commander. Nobody plays it, right? Of course, nobody plays it in Commander. Who cares about a 3/3? Even turn 1 3/3 in Commander is not that great. Does that even get played in other formats though? That's how stupid things have gotten. Is a 1 mana 3/3, I don't even know if it would get played. It might get played in Standard. That's it. Like, where would that get played? I don't play in other formats right now. If a 1 mana 3/3, let me know in the comments below. A green, probably would be green, 1 mana 3/3 creature comes out in the next set, just a vanilla creature. Does it even see play in any formats? I don't even know. That's how silly things have gotten. But of course, that's where we're at. That's the kind of thing we're dealing with. I don't think I need to cover the power creep thing too much. We all know that it is happening and it's likely speeding up the format. Let's talk about something a little less obvious here and a little more controversial probably, which is that I really don't think the Commander format is a singleton format anymore. Of course, it technically is, but it really isn't in that what singleton is supposed to be, which is supposed to, basically make it so that it's a lot harder to build around one specific thing, and it makes it a lot less likely to get you that one card. Well, it's okay. I don't need to get that one card because now I have like 20 different options of that card, right? That's what I mean by it's not really a singleton format anymore. You really have to be playing a fringe theme, a really fringe theme, in order to not have 1,000 different cards out there that will support the theme you're in. There's just so much support for damn near every single theme now that it makes it so that it's not that difficult to get to the stuff you need, right? If you have a deck built around a specific strategy, let's say the +1/+1 counter strategy, I need certain cards, right? I need that doubling season because that doubling season is going to make it so that it doubles the counters on my creatures. I mean, you don't need it, but of course it's going to accelerate you to victory. Well, that's okay. There is like 15 different options, and I don't even think I'm exaggerating now. There's 15 different options for a doubling season now. So drawing a doubling season-like effect off the top of my library is not that difficult anymore, right? That's what I mean by the format's not really a singleton format anymore, because there's just so many effects that do that thing. Even if I'm in a more fringe theme, I'm not playing green, let's say, because green's probably the best colors for a +1/+1 counter theme. I'm doing an Azorius +1/+1 counter deck. Wow, that's so fringe, right? Nah, not really. There's actually a ton of support in blue and white colors for doing a +1/+1 or just counters in general theme. There's so much of that. And again, that's another thing they're doing where they're not even saying whenever you put a +1/+1 counter on your creature or anything like that anymore. They're just saying whenever you put a counter on your creature. So they're even opening up stuff to make it so that now that card doesn't work with that specific theme. It actually works with a bunch of other themes as well, right? Doorport Mage is a great example of that. 1 and a blue, Frog Wizard 1/3. Whenever one or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, draw a card. Okay, well, there's like 3 or 4 different archetypes that want to be doing that, right? Not only are they giving you this card that is really great card draw in your specific theme, okay, but it's also great card draw in like 5 other themes, right? It works in the blinking theme. It works in the bouncing my creatures theme. It works in ninjas because, of course, ninjas are returning creatures to your hand. So they're doing that as well. They're opening it up so that this card doesn't specifically work in this theme, but it also works in a bunch of other themes as well. And of course, again, back to the doubling season, we have so many effects like that where do this thing another time. The do more, win more, whatever you want to call it, the Panharmonicon effects where if you're going to do this thing, you do it again. That is obviously accelerating the format, right? There is so many effects like that. Now it's actually gotten kind of comical in my opinion. We have commanders that do it as well. I mean, even the Panharmonicon effects aren't rare. There's a bunch of those in the format. You want to create more tokens, you want to do this thing another time or that thing another time. There's 1,000 options for that. And of course, the one that's going to accelerate a game the most is the damage doubling or damage tripling effects. We in fact have several damage tripling effects in the format. Of course, that's absolutely going to accelerate games without a question. All right, and the last topic that I'm going to cover here, which is one that might be flying under the radar for a lot of people, is a trend that I have noticed happening in the format quite a bit lately, and especially in this last year, they've really poured it on, which is the effects that deal damage to each opponent, right? And that has a double whammy sort of situation when it comes to speeding up games, because of course, they are giving you basically a win con for pretty much every scenario you're in. It doesn't really matter what the scenario is. Whatever archetype you're fitting now, almost every archetype you could possibly think of, there is an effect that's going to hit all your opponents for damage or lose life. Same thing, right? Again, the gutter snipe effects or the psychosis crawler effects, which would be win cons for a lot of decks, a few years ago. I mean, there's 1,000 options for that now. There are so many options. Again, whatever archetype you have, basically there's probably an option out there for you. And it's not just the hit that guy like a blood artist, right? A blood artist is just target player. You gotta have a lot of creatures die to close out a game with a blood artist. That's okay though. We can just use an effect that hits all opponents now. They pretty much entirely now, because of the commander format, whenever they print an effect like that, it's always each opponent, not target opponent or target player. It's always each opponent loses life. I checked out just from this year alone. This is the list that I found from just, I guess, the last year. Okay. The cards that are doing the deal damage to all of my opponents whenever this thing happens, okay? Alchemist Talent. Whenever you cast a spell, if mana was spent from a treasure to cast it, it deals damage equal to its mana value to each opponent. A Jade Instigator. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. Also has offspring, so you can get 2 copies of it. Fire Spitter Whelp. Whenever you cast a non-creature or dragon spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. Of course, it's a dragon, so easy slot into any dragon deck. Not that those decks needed any help winning, but here's another option. Giggling Skitterspike. This one's absolutely insane. When it attacks or blocks or becomes the target of a spell, because of course, blocking and attacking wasn't enough, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. It's a 1/1, but that's okay. We can give it Monstrosity 5, so it becomes a 6/6. So you Monstrosity this thing, it becomes a 6/6, and every time it attacks, it deals 6 damage to each of my opponents? That's crazy. And then my opponent tries to swords it. Hey, take 6 more damage on the way out. Nuts. Coruscation Mage. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. Not that we needed more effects like this, but there's another one. And again, has the offspring. Heartfire Hero. Bloomborough had an absolute ton of these. Whenever Heartfire Hero dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. And of course, it's putting +1/+1 counters on itself. Molten Gatekeeper. Obviously, we have a lot of effects like this in red. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Molten Firekeeper deals 1 damage to each opponent. Just imagine, there are so many effects like this now that I can play a red deck and not even attack. I can play, red is the best color at aggro and attacking, but I can now play a red deck and never attack and be just fine because there are so many. Again, that's what I'm talking about with, it's not really a singleton format. There's so many effects like this. The Perforos effects, we got so many now you can make an entire deck doing it without putting Perforos in the command zone, of course, Unstable Amulet. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, Unstable Amulet deals 1 damage to each opponent. So now there's an effect for when you're doing an archetype like that. Teapot Slinger. Whenever you expend 4, Teapot Slinger deals 2 damage to each opponent. How about the commanders? Let's do this in the command zone, right? Arabella. When it attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and you gain X life, or X the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. Ashling Flame Dancer. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, discard a card, then draw a card. If it is the second time this ability resolved this turn, Ashling Flame Dancer deals 2 damage to each opponent. Aurelia the Law Above. Whenever a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, Aurelia the Law Above deals 3 damage to each of your opponents, and you gain 3 life. Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest. Another commander dealing damage to all of your opponents. Whenever it enters or attacks, exile the top X cards of your library. X is the number of creatures you control with power 4 or greater. You may play those cards until you end your next end step, but you probably don't want to because at the beginning of your next end step, Dragonhawk deals 2 damage to each opponent for each of those cards that are still exiled. So you can just exile lots of cards from your library and just have your opponents take 5, 6, or 8 or 10 damage every turn. Evior, Battle Ready. That's right, I'm still going here. These are just the cards that came out this year. Whenever Evior, Battle Ready attacks, it deals damage equal to the number of equipment you control to each opponent. This is just the equipment you control. It's not even the equipment attached to this guy. Obviously, this guy goes in every equipment deck if you're not already playing him. Xiao Jun. Now, this is just Assassin's Creed. I found 3 commanders from Assassin's Creed that are doing this. Tap 2 untapped artifacts you control. Xiao Jun deals 1 damage to each opponent. Arbaz Mir. This guy is bananas. I just talked about him in my underrated commanders from last year video, whatever I called it. My patron has this deck and absolutely stomped us with it. Whenever Arbaz Mir or another non-token historic permanent enters the battlefield under your control, deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life. And he killed us just with this. I don't even think he needed to attack the whole entire game. Just this, dealing damage to each opponent, so easy to close out games. And I'm only counting the damage dealing stuff. I'm not even including the life loss like Kambal, or very underrated commander as well that I talked about. Win con stapled on your commander, all your opponents lose life whenever a token enters the battlefield. Probably the worst example of this ever is Marionette Apprentice. And this is sort of like all the things I talked about sort of combined into one. It's very obviously power creep. It's very obviously, less of a singleton format, because this is whenever another creature or artifact you control is put in your graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses one life. So it's doing all these things I've talked about on one card. It's obviously power creep. It's hitting all my opponents at once. It's giving me a very easy win con for my deck. And also it's combined creature with artifact, right? It's not even just a Zulaport Cutthroat. Let's tack on artifact there as well. And oh yeah, it also has the Fabricate. So insane power creep, but also combining the archetypes, where I can put this in all of my decks where I'm doing the typical aristocrats thing, but I can also put it in an artifact deck as well. My patron has an Ashnod, the mono black Ashnod, and he stomped our butts. Again, there's a very underwhelming commander. This is exactly what I'm talking about. There's a very underwhelming commander in the mono black artifact theme, but even in that theme, a very, you would think, fringe theme, there is so much support in a mono black artifact theme now that it's very easy for someone to close out a game with it. I have another patron with an Ovaya deck, a commander I've talked about before being underrated, and I won't be talking about it anymore because I don't even know if it's underrated or underwhelming. It's certainly not underwhelming anymore because, again, even in mono green, he has no problem at all. No problem at all doing a mono green artifact theme because there is just so much support, not only in mono green. Again, they even have mono green cards that are supporting the artifact theme now. So again, no matter what direction you go, whether it is off color or archetype specific or whatever, there's going to be a ton of support for you, right? So again, it is a whole bunch of things converging into one, where it's color pie breaks, it's power creep, it's cards that cover several different topics, but also we have so much of all of it, right? We're getting so many cards and all of it is engineered for the commander format that we no longer have issue getting to the cards we need for the archetype we're playing. You really have to play a super, super fringe theme in order to not have an absolute ton of support. A lot of people would say that's a good thing. I'm just saying, I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. I mean, for me, I think it is, but I'm saying it's why the commander format is speeding up, because as I'm drawing cards off the top of my library in my mono green artifact deck, likely I'm going to get to the stuff that is supporting my theme because there's so much of it now. That's what I'm saying, right? I have a Patron of Kitsune deck, and that deck, when I first made it, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, it was in mono white life gain, which of course, mono white gains life very easily. The issue there is you really didn't have a lot of payoff. Archangel Athum was about it. And then right after that, I got Heliod in that deck, right? That was the fringe part about that deck, was I didn't have a lot of payoff. I mean, gaining life is good, but I didn't have a lot of ways to help me close out a game through gaining life. There was only a couple of options. Again, that's the whole point. We're the singleton format, right? That's supposed to be how it works. We started getting more and more and more. I started getting less and less excited. When they first started coming out with them, I'm like, oh, wow, I can go with my Patron the Kitsune deck. And then it eventually got to the point where I'm like, oh, another one? Okay, I don't even think I'm going to make room in my deck for that. I don't need them anymore. And in fact, it's gotten so ridiculous that my Patron of the Kitsune deck became this boring life gain deck, and I tried to find another theme that I could integrate into the deck to make it a little more diverse. So I integrated the +1/+1 counter theme. Great. So now I'm doing the life gain theme and the +1/+1 counter theme. Hey, that's kind of fringe. No, not really. Actually, there's an absolute ton of cards that fit both of them. You'd think that would be fringe. Combining life gain and +1/+1 counters? Nah, there's a ton of support for that theme as well. So much so that I had a hard time figuring out what I wanted to put in the deck, right? So that's sort of where we got into. Without too much complaining, the point I'm trying to make in this video is that's why the format has sped up. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons. And in my opinion, it's not even really a singleton format anymore. There's just so much support for every theme. Again, that just think about as you're drawing cards off the top of your deck. Hey, it's a card that supports my Azorius +1/+1 counter theme, right? There's so many options for that. Hey, I'm playing a mono green artifact deck. And look, as I'm drawing cards, like every second card is a card that supports that theme. Even in the fringe themes now, it's not really a singleton format because you have so many options to support what you're doing. And it is certainly speeding up the format, right? If I have three or four really good cards to support my theme. Again, just like my Patron the Kitsune deck, I only had like two or three good payoffs for gaining life. I had like Well Lost Dreams and Archangel Athun and whatever. So I had to get to those cards in order for my deck to really start taking off. Now people's decks take off right out of the gate. Like I'm looking around the board, playing with my patrons again. We play very casual decks, presumably, right? I'm looking around the board and it's like, okay, I have the one guy playing the Ashnod deck and the other guy playing the Ovaya deck. Very underwhelming commanders. And it's like turn 5 and they're just going off already, right? So I know that's where we're at. And it certainly is not slowing down anytime soon, though. Again, that's one of the issues here with the power creep and everything else is you can't go backwards, right? These cards are going to be around forever. They're certainly not going to be banned. Anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you think, why I think the Commander format has sped up. It certainly has. Some of the reasons why it has. You guys let me know if there's any other reasons you can think of. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.